What is your full name?
Margarete Himmler.
Are you alone here?
Nein, meine Tochter Gudrun ist bei mir.
And what was your husband's name?
Heinrich Himmler.
Imagine being born into a legacy steeped in infamy, where your lineage ties you to one of history's darkest chapters. This is the tale of Gudrun Himmler, a figure overshadowed by her father, Heinrich Himmler, architect of the Holocaust. Our journey delves into her life, exploring how she navigated this heavy heritage. Did she shun the notorious past or embrace it? Let's uncover the story of Gudrun, the daughter in the shadow of a Nazi leader. Gudrun Himmler, upholding a dark legacy. Gudrun Himmler's story is not just a footnote in history, but a profound narrative about the complex interplay of family loyalty, historical legacy, and moral choice. Born on August 8, 1929 in Munich, Gudrun was the apple of Heinrich Himmler's eye. He affectionately called her Puppy, Little Doll, a nickname symbolizing their close bond. Gudrun's early years were enveloped in the seemingly idyllic world of her parents, Heinrich and Margarete Himmler, both ardent supporters of the Nazi ideology. The formative years of Gudrun's life coincided with the rise of Nazism in Germany. As her father ascended the ranks to become the Reichsführer SS and overseer of the concentration and extermination camps, Gudrun remained largely shielded from the grim realities of her father's role. The family's agricultural estate offered a semblance of normalcy, despite the undercurrents of the extremist ideology that pervaded their home life. For Gudrun, the war years were a blend of domestic life and a burgeoning realization of her father's prominence in the Nazi regime. Her journal entries and letters to her father during this time reflect a mix of adolescent innocence and indoctrination. The war, to her, seemed like a distant narrative, with her father as the hero. She wrote to him with admiration and affection, unaware of the atrocities he was orchestrating. The end of World War II marked a turning point in Gudrun's life. With the fall of the Third Reich, the Himmler family faced the direct consequences of Heinrich's actions. Gudrun, along with her mother, was detained by Allied forces, while Heinrich Himmler committed suicide to avoid capture. For Gudrun, then just 15 years old, the realization of her father's suicide and the nature of his crimes was a traumatic shock. She refused to believe the accounts of his death and the extent of his atrocities, clinging instead to the image of the loving father she knew. In the post-war years, while Germany underwent a process of denazification, Gudrun's path diverged significantly from those seeking atonement. She steadfastly sought to rehabilitate her father's image, refusing to accept the overwhelming evidence of his crimes. Her efforts included supporting and aiding former Nazis through organizations like Stille Hilfe, Silent Aid. This commitment to her father's legacy wasn't without personal cost. Gudrun faced social ostracism and lost jobs and housing due to her surname and unwavering stance. Despite the societal backlash, Gudrun's resolve only strengthened. She became deeply involved in neo-Nazi circles, marrying Wolf-Dieter Burwitz, a known neo-Nazi, and continuing her activism. Her presence at events like the Ulrichsburg gatherings, commemorating fallen German soldiers, including SS members, highlighted her continued allegiance to her father's memory. Gudrun's life was a testament to the enduring impact of indoctrination and the complexity of familial bonds. She lived her life in the shadow of her father, unwavering in her belief of his innocence. Death on May 24, 2018, marked the end of a controversial and tragic chapter. A life defined by a refusal to acknowledge the horrors of her father's actions. Gudrun Himmler's story raises profound questions about the nature of legacy, the impact of upbringing, and the choices we make in the face of historical truths. Her journey from the daughter of a high-ranking Nazi official to a lifelong defender of his legacy is a stark reminder of the long shadows cast by history's darkest figures. It challenges us to consider how the past shapes us, and how we, in turn, shape the memory of the past. Martin Bormann, Jr., A Path of Rejection and Redemption. Martin Adolf Bormann Jr.'s life story presents a stark contrast to that of Gudrun Himmler, illustrating a journey from a burdened legacy to a quest for redemption. Born on April 14, 1930, in Grunwald, Bavaria, Martin was the son of Martin Bormann, Adolf Hitler's devout personal secretary. Growing up in the shadow of one of the most influential figures in the Nazi regime, his early life was steeped in the ideology and privilege of the inner Nazi circle. Martin's childhood was set against the backdrop of Berchtesgaden, near Hitler's mountain retreat. His father's rising prominence within the Nazi hierarchy meant a life surrounded by the regime's elite. Martin and his siblings grew up in a surreal bubble of apparent normalcy, playing and attending school with other children of Nazi leaders, seemingly oblivious to the grim realities of the world outside. However, the facade of a normal childhood quickly crumbled with the end of World War II. As the Third Reich collapsed, so did the world Martin knew. In the chaos of the war's end, he found himself separated from his family, fleeing to the Austrian mountains. His father remained in Berlin, loyal to Hitler until the end, and later died under mysterious circumstances. This abrupt end to his childhood and the subsequent revelations about his father's role in the Nazi regime forced Martin to confront a harsh truth. He grappled with the realization that his father was not just a high-ranking official, but a key architect of the Holocaust. The weight of this legacy was a heavy burden for the young Martin, leading him to adopt a pseudonym and live in hiding. Martin's journey towards redemption began in the most unlikely of places, a small Austrian farm where he sought refuge. Here, among a rural, deeply religious family, he was introduced to the Christian faith, a stark contrast to the vehemently anti-Christian stance of his father. This exposure to a different set of values and beliefs set Martin on a path of introspection and transformation. In the years following the war, Martin chose to reveal his true identity and confront his past. His decision to become a priest was a definitive break from his family's legacy. Ordained in Innsbruck, Austria, he dedicated his life to serving others, a stark contrast to his father's life of servitude to a destructive regime. His actions were not just a renunciation of his past, but a proactive step towards atonement. Martin's commitment to his new life was further solidified by his humanitarian work. He served in the Congo during a period of civil war, bringing aid and comfort to those suffering from the conflict. This service in a war-torn country was symbolic of his desire to heal wounds, not just his own, but those of others. In a dramatic twist, Martin's life took another turn when he fell in love with Rosemarie, a nun. Their mutual decision to leave their religious vows and marry marked a new chapter of personal happiness and continued commitment to serving others. Together, they lived a life far removed from the shadows of his father's past. Martin's journey towards redemption was not without its challenges. The legacy of his father's actions continued to cast a long shadow, and he faced accusations related to the church scandals later in life. Despite these challenges, he remained committed to his path of atonement until his death in 2013. The story of Martin Bormann Jr. is a powerful narrative of personal transformation and redemption. It's a tale that reminds us that we are not bound by the circumstances of our birth or the sins of our parents. Martin's life shows that it is possible to choose a different path, to reject a legacy of hate and embrace one of love and service. His story is a testament to the power of personal choice and the capacity for change, offering a hopeful counterpoint to the narratives of those who remained entrenched in a dark past. Shadows of the past, psychological impacts and societal responses. The lives of the children of Nazi leaders, like Gudrun Himmler and Martin Bormann Jr., offer a profound insight into the psychological impacts and societal responses to a dark heritage. These individuals navigated life under the immense shadow of their parents' notorious legacies, a journey fraught with complex psychological challenges and varied social reactions. The psychological burden borne by these children is multifaceted. For someone like Gudrun Himmler, growing up as the beloved daughter of Heinrich Himmler, there was a deep psychological conflict. On one hand, there was the loving father she knew. On the other, the architect of some of the most horrific crimes in history. This dissonance often leads to a form of cognitive dissonance where the child struggles to reconcile the public image of the parent with their personal experiences. In Gudrun's case, this dissonance manifested in a steadfast denial of her father's atrocities, leading to a lifelong mission to rehabilitate his image. This denial can be viewed as a psychological defense mechanism, shielding her from the unbearable truth of her father's deeds and her own identity crisis as his daughter. For Martin Bormann Jr., the psychological journey was different, but equally complex. Learning about his father's role in the Holocaust forced him into a profound identity crisis. The revelation was a shattering of the image of the parent he knew, leading to feelings of betrayal, shame, and guilt by association. His decision to become a priest and engage in humanitarian work can be seen as a way of atoning, not just for his father's sins, but also coping with his own psychological trauma. The societal response to these children was as varied as their personal journeys. They were often viewed through the lens of their parents' crimes, leading to stigmatization and ostracism. For Gudrun, her unapologetic stance and active involvement in neo-Nazi circles only reinforced this perception, making her a controversial figure. In post-war Germany, where denazification and coming to terms with the Nazi past were central to the nation's recovery, Gudrun's refusal to denounce her father was seen as an affront to these efforts. She faced social and professional repercussions, often losing jobs and housing due to her last name and her unrepentant attitude. Conversely, Martin's path of renunciation and redemption elicited a more sympathetic response. His choice to reject his father's legacy and dedicate his life to serving others was seen as a courageous act of breaking away from a burdensome past. Yet he too faced challenges, particularly in his early years when he had to hide his true identity to avoid retribution. The stories of these individuals also highlight the role of collective memory and education in dealing with the legacies of historical atrocities. In societies striving to move past a dark history, the tales of these children serve as reminders of the lingering effects of such legacies on personal identities and societal perceptions. Educational initiatives that focus on the Holocaust and the Nazi era often use these stories to illustrate the human aspects of history. They serve as powerful examples of the choices individuals face when confronted with a legacy of hatred and violence, whether to perpetuate that legacy or to break free from it. A comparative study: ideological devotion versus moral defiance. The contrasting lives of Gudrun Himmler and Martin Bormann Jr. present a fascinating study in ideological devotion versus moral defiance. These narratives provide a window into how the children of Nazi leaders coped with their inherited legacies in diametrically opposed ways. Gudrun Himmler exemplified unwavering ideological devotion. Her life was a testament to her steadfast commitment to her father, Heinrich Himmler, and by extension, to the ideals of Nazism. From a psychological perspective, Gudrun's relentless defense of her father can be seen as a coping mechanism, rooted in a deep-seated denial and a need to preserve a positive image of her father. Gudrun's actions throughout her life mirrored this devotion. She actively participated in neo-Nazi organizations, provided support to former SS members, and maintained her father's ideology. Her presence at neo-Nazi gatherings and her refusal to accept the historical truths about her father's crimes underscored her commitment to upholding his legacy. This ideological devotion, while providing her a sense of purpose and identity, also isolated her from mainstream society and made her a controversial figure.
Auch die Frau gehört zur SS. Sie ist ein Teil der SS, da wir nicht nur ein soldatischer Verband, sondern eine Gemeinschaft, ein Orden sind.
In stark contrast to Gudrun Himmler, Martin Bormann Jr. chose a path of moral defiance. Learning about his father's role in the atrocities of the Holocaust was a turning point for Martin. Instead of following in his father's footsteps or living in denial, he embarked on a journey of self-discovery and redemption. Martin's choice to become a priest was more than a career path. It was a symbolic act of defiance against everything his father stood for. His work in the Congo and his subsequent marriage and life choices further distanced him from his Nazi lineage. Martin's life is a testament to the power of personal choice and moral courage. It demonstrates that one can break free from a dark legacy and forge a path rooted in compassion and service to others. The divergent paths taken by Gudrun and Martin offer critical insights into how individuals cope with burdensome legacies. Gudrun's unwavering ideological devotion and Martin's moral defiance highlight two extremes of human response to inherited histories. Gudrun's life was defined by her refusal to acknowledge the crimes of her father and the Nazi regime. This denial was her way of preserving her personal narrative and identity. Her actions can be seen as a manifestation of the psychological concept of splitting, where an individual fails to reconcile the good and bad aspects of a parent and chooses to see them as wholly good. In contrast, Martin's life was a journey towards understanding and atonement. His decision to embrace a life diametrically opposed to his father's beliefs reflects a conscious choice to define himself not by his lineage, but by his values and actions. Martin's transformation from the son of a high-ranking Nazi to a humanitarian and priest is a powerful narrative of moral defiance and personal redemption. The stories of Gudrun and Martin have broader implications for society's understanding of history and legacy. They serve as poignant reminders that the children of perpetrators of atrocities often grapple with complex psychological and moral dilemmas. These narratives challenge us to think about how we, as a society, remember and interpret the past. Furthermore, their stories encourage a more nuanced understanding of the human capacity for both adherence to and defiance against inherited ideologies. They remind us that history is not just a series of events, but a tapestry woven from individual lives, choices, and actions. Echoes in History: The Continuing Legacy of Nazi Leaders' Children. The stories of the children of Nazi leaders, like Gudrun Himmler and Martin Bormann Jr., continue to echo in history, offering insights into the long-term impacts of a dark legacy on individuals and societies. These narratives are not mere historical curiosities. They are profound reminders of the enduring effects of a traumatic past. The lives of Gudrun and Martin highlight the inescapable influence of familial ties. For Gudrun, her identity was inextricably linked to her father, Heinrich Himmler. Her unwavering defense of him and her active participation in neo-Nazi activities were attempts to preserve and honor his memory, demonstrating how familial loyalty can sometimes override moral and ethical considerations. On the other hand, Martin Bormann Jr.'s life story showcases the possibility of breaking free from the shadows of a tainted legacy. His path of moral defiance and transformation illustrates the potential for individuals to redefine themselves, separate from their family's past. Martin's journey underscores the human capacity for change and redemption, even in the face of overwhelming historical burdens. The contrasting paths of Gudrun and Martin also highlight the role of historical memory in shaping individual destinies and societal perceptions. Their stories are a testament to the importance of how history is remembered and taught. For societies grappling with dark chapters of their past, these narratives offer valuable lessons in understanding and coming to terms with history. Gudrun's denial of her father's crimes and her adherence to Nazi ideology reflect the dangers of a selective or distorted historical memory. In contrast, Martin's acknowledgement of his father's wrongdoings and his efforts to make amends represent a more constructive engagement with the past. These examples underscore the need for a holistic and honest confrontation with history to prevent the repetition of past mistakes. The lives of the children of Nazi leaders remain relevant in contemporary society, as they offer lessons in dealing with the legacies of historical atrocities. They serve as reminders of the importance of confronting the past, acknowledging the truth, and the potential for healing and reconciliation. In a world still grappling with the consequences of hatred, racism, and extremism, the stories of Gudrun and Martin provide valuable insights into the roots of these evils and the ways they can be addressed. Their narratives encourage an examination of how societal values, education, and family influence shape individual beliefs and actions. The echoes of Gudrun and Martin's stories resonate with future generations, emphasizing the ongoing impact of historical events on subsequent generations. They raise important questions about responsibility, guilt, and the legacy of parents' actions on their children. These narratives encourage a deeper understanding of how the past continues to shape the present and future, influencing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. For educators, historians, and policymakers, the lives of Gudrun and Martin offer valuable case studies in the complexities of dealing with historical legacies. They provide real-life examples of the challenges faced by individuals born into families associated with historical atrocities and the diverse ways they can respond to this burden. The dichotomy of heritage. Navigating the shadows of infamy. Exploring the lives of the children of Nazi leaders reveals a dichotomy inherent in their heritage. Born into families steeped in infamy, these individuals navigate a complex maze of personal identity, societal judgment, and historical burden. Their stories, differing vastly from one another, present a spectrum of responses to a legacy marked by atrocity and shame. For these children, the notoriety of their parents' actions casts a long, inescapable shadow over their lives. The case of Gudrun Himmler epitomizes the struggle of living under the weight of a notorious surname. Gudrun's life was perpetually tethered to the legacy of her father, Heinrich Himmler, one of the principal architects of the Holocaust. Her unwavering defense of him and her association with neo-Nazi circles illustrate a life defined by the struggle to reconcile personal love with public abhorrence. Conversely, Martin Bormann Jr.'s journey demonstrates the possibility of breaking away from the infamy of one's lineage. His decision to become a priest and dedicate his life to humanitarian causes stands as a stark contrast to his father's role as Hitler's secretary. Martin's story is one of defiance and redemption, showing that it is possible to forge an identity separate from a stained family legacy. Society often views the children of infamous figures through a lens colored by the actions of their parents. This external pressure can significantly influence their life choices and self-perception. Gudrun Himmler's embrace of her father's ideology can be partially attributed to societal expectations and the stigmatization she faced. In defiance of public condemnation, she clung more tightly to her father's memory, perhaps as a means of preserving her own identity amidst widespread vilification. In contrast, Martin Bormann Jr.'s decision to renounce his father's ideology and seek a path of atonement can be seen as a response to the same societal expectations. His choice to live a life diametrically opposed to his father's atrocities was, in part, a way to rectify the family name and carve out a personal identity based on his own beliefs and actions. The psychological impact on these individuals cannot be overstated. Growing up as the offspring of high-ranking Nazi officials involved a complex process of understanding and coming to terms with their family's role in history. For Gudrun, coping meant holding on to a sanitized image of her father, rejecting the overwhelming evidence of his crimes. This denial was her way of maintaining a semblance of normalcy in a life forever marked by her father's actions. Martin Bormann Jr.'s approach was one of confrontation and transformation. By acknowledging the heinous nature of his father's actions, he embarked on a journey of self-discovery and moral realignment. His embrace of the priesthood and humanitarian work can be seen as coping mechanisms, ways to distance himself from his father's legacy and atone for sins not his own. The divergent paths of Gudrun Himmler and Martin Bormann Jr. have significant implications for our understanding of history. They remind us that history is not just a collection of events, but is deeply personal and often painfully complex. Their stories challenge us to consider the human aspect of historical narratives, particularly how the families of infamous figures navigate their legacies. The tales of these children resonate into the present, offering lessons in resilience, identity, and moral courage. They serve as a reminder that the echoes of history are felt far beyond the immediate aftermath of events. For educators, policymakers, and society at large, these stories are valuable in understanding how the past shapes the present and influences the future.